Imagine you're sitting in your room, staring at a tiny speck of dust floating in a sunbeam. Now picture that speck of dust as a bustling city filled with creatures so small, you can't see them with your naked eye. This is the world that Antoni van Leeuwenhoek, a Dutch draper from Delft, discovered in the 17th century. His discovery of microorganisms was as groundbreaking as Galileo's discovery of the moons of Jupiter. But before we dive into Leeuwenhoek's world, let's take a step back and understand why his findings were so revolutionary. In the 17th century, the world was still grappling with the idea that there could be things too small to see. The same skepticism that made Galileo's critics unwilling to look through his telescope also plagued the microscope. The telescope was useful for battles and navigation, but the microscope seemed more like a curiosity. People were wary of optical illusions and thought that any device standing between their senses and the object they were trying to see could only mislead them. After all, God had given them their eyes, and they believed that any device could only distort what they saw. Despite these doubts, the microscope began to gain traction. In 1665, Robert Hooke, an English scientist, published his book Micrographia. This book was a game changer. Hooke used a compound microscope to describe and illustrate the intricate details of everyday objects. His drawings of a fly's eye, a bee's stinger, and the anatomy of a flea were so detailed and accurate that they captivated the scientific community. Hooke even coined the term cell to describe the honeycomb-like structures he observed in cork. His work showed that the microscopic world was just as complex and fascinating as the macroscopic world. However, not everyone was convinced. Hooke's new world was initially met with ridicule. For example, Thomas Shadwell's play The Virtuoso, 1676, mocked the idea of a microscopic world. But as more people began to use microscopes and see for themselves, the skepticism slowly faded. One of the most important figures in the history of microscopy was Antoni van Leeuwenhoek. And like Hooke did not come from a scientific background. He was a draper who sold silk, wool, and other fabrics. He also held several local government positions, including inspector of weights and measures and court surveyor. Despite his lack of formal education, Leeuwenhoek had a keen interest in lenses and magnifying glasses. He began making his own simple microscopes, grinding lenses by hand and mounting them in metal frames. Leeuwenhoek's microscopes were different from the compound microscopes used by Hooke. They used a single lens and were much smaller, but they had a magnifying power of up to 500 times. This allowed him to see things that no one had ever seen before. In 1674, he collected a sample of water from a nearby lake and placed it under his microscope. What he saw was mind-boggling. The water was teeming with tiny creatures, which he called animalcules. These were the first bacteria ever observed. Leeuwenhoek was both amazed and excited. He wrote to the Royal Society in London, describing his findings. He described the water as alive with many thousands of living creatures, each several creature having its own proper motion. His descriptions were so vivid and detailed that even those who were initially skeptical began to take notice. One of Leeuwenhoek's most significant contributions was his discovery of spermatozoa. At the time, it was believed that semen was just a fertilizing vapor. Leeuwenhoek, however, saw tiny, swimming creatures in human semen. He described them as animalcules, and suggested that they played a crucial role in reproduction. This was a radical idea, but it was based on what he observed through his microscope. Leeuwenhoek's work was not limited to biology. He also made observations in botany, entomology, and crystallography. He studied the structure of plant cells, the development of insects, and the formation of crystals. His observations were so detailed and accurate that they laid the foundation for many fields of modern science. Despite his achievements, Leeuwenhoek faced skepticism and criticism. Some people accused him of seeing things that weren't there, or of using his imagination to create these animalcules. To counter these accusations, Leeuwenhoek invited respectable citizens to his shop to witness his observations firsthand. He even had them sign affidavits, confirming what they had seen. This helped to build credibility for his work. The microscope, like the telescope, opened up new frontiers of exploration. While great sea voyages required large capital and skilled navigators, a lone individual with a microscope could explore a whole new world. Leeuwenhoek's work showed that the microscopic world was vast and complex, just like the macroscopic world. He opened the door to a universe of tiny creatures that had been invisible to the human eye until then. The microscope also played a crucial role in dispelling the myth of spontaneous generation. For centuries, it was believed that certain organisms, like maggots and mice, could spontaneously generate from non-living matter. Leeuwenhoek's observations showed that even the smallest creatures had complex life cycles and reproduced in specific ways. This was a significant step in the development of modern biology. The collaboration between scientists in different countries also played a crucial role in the advancement of microscopy. Despite the commercial rivalry between the Dutch and the British, scientists from both countries shared information and exchanged ideas. The Royal Society in London, for example, published Leeuwenhoek's findings and provided him with a platform to share his discoveries with a wider audience. This international community of scientists helped to advance knowledge and build a foundation for future discoveries. The microscope also had a significant impact on the way people viewed the natural world. Before Leeuwenhoek, the microscopic world was a mystery. His observations showed that the world was far more complex and interconnected than anyone had imagined. This new understanding of the microscopic world had implications for medicine, biology, and even philosophy. For example, the discovery of microorganisms helped to explain the spread of diseases. Before Leeuwenhoek, it was not understood how diseases spread from one person to another. His observations of bacteria and other microorganisms provided a basis for understanding the causes of infectious diseases. This knowledge was crucial in the development of modern medicine and public health practices. The microscope also had a profound impact on the way people thought about the natural world. Leeuwenhoek's observations showed that even the smallest creatures had their own unique characteristics and behaviors. This challenged the prevailing notion that only higher animals, like humans, had complex lives and behaviors. It also challenged the idea that the natural world was static and unchanging. Instead, it showed that the natural world was dynamic and full of life, even at the smallest scale. The microscope also played a role in the development of scientific methods. Leeuwenhoek's detailed observations and meticulous record-keeping set a new standard for scientific research. His work demonstrated the importance of careful observation and empirical evidence. This approach to science laid the foundation for the modern scientific method, which emphasizes the importance of observation, experimentation, and evidence-based conclusions. The microscope also had a cultural impact. Leeuwenhoek's discoveries captured the imagination of the public and inspired a new generation of scientists. His work showed that science was not just the domain of the elite, but could be pursued by anyone with curiosity and a desire to learn. This democratization of science helped to break down barriers and make science more accessible to a wider audience. In conclusion, Antoni van Leeuwenhoek's work with the microscope was a turning point in the history of science. His discoveries opened up a new world of microscopic life and challenged long-held beliefs about the natural world. His detailed observations and meticulous record-keeping set a new standard for scientific research and laid the foundation for the modern scientific method. The microscope, like the telescope, opened up new frontiers of exploration and helped to advance our understanding of the natural world. Leeuwenhoek's legacy continues to influence science and medicine to this day, and his work remains a testament to the power of curiosity and the importance of careful observation.